everybody to this is the first keynote presentation of the virtual world's best practices in education. And we are so thrilled to have you here, whether you are joining us from across the street or across the globe. This community never ceases to inspire all of us. Today, we have the distinct honor of hearing from a man who actually made gatherings like this possible. Our keynote speaker is a physicist turned coder turned visionary, someone who looked at the early internet and saw not just a network, but a world waiting to be built. He founded Linden Labs and created Second Life, the virtual world that has been home to educators, artists, researchers, and dreamers for over 2 decades. He has since explored spatial audio, open source VR platforms, digital currency, and even the frontiers of machine consciousness. And in October 2024, he returned to Second Life as CTO, bringing fresh energy and new ideas to a platform many of us call home. So please join me in giving a very warm VWBPE welcome to the founder of Second Life himself, Philip Rosedale.
Thank you, Marie. Thank you, everyone. Such a pleasure. Fun to see everyone. I agree that I feel a little bit like, I don't know, a king standing on a rather high cliff top above you all. I guess we'll just go with that. It's a pleasure to see everyone's faces, even at this distance. I already see a few people that I recognize. Always part of the fun of being here. You know, I think one of the magical things about Second Life is coming back after 20 years and finding so many of the same friends still around, and this is obviously one of the many amazing things about Second Life that we should all be celebrating. So first of all, can everybody hear me okay? Or lots of you? Great. Sorry if anyone who can't, but yep, that looks good. Thank you, thank you. It is always fun to make a click stream like that, or a text stream. Nice to watch. So what I thought we would do today, again, thanks for having me. I want to talk about the world that you're in of education, but before that I just want to start with some broader opening thoughts, and I'll talk for a while and then we can have some Q&A. Yeah, and it is always a pleasure to be here and get a chance to do this, and I'm sure we'll speak a bit more broadly than education, but you know, first of all, thank you for all you do and everything you've done so far with education in Second Life. And I hope that, well, I hope that I can maybe give some interesting, you know, things to think about in that regard, and perhaps we can chat a little bit about direction. As Marie said, I returned over a year ago, just about a year ago now, as CTO. We've been recently joined by a great new VP of Engineering named Jerome. Jerome will be taking over many of the many project-related aspects of different things that I've been doing over time, and so you'll be hearing from him more as he gets his feet on the ground here, and I think that's going to be a delight. He's a fantastic add to our team. As you've also known, we've been hiring a number of people lately, which has also been a pleasure to have a number of new faces amongst us that I've been able to work with. So, to start, I have a favorite quote that you might see in different places on my socials, which is, all models are wrong, some models are useful. As a person with a physics background, this quote means a lot to me. It speaks to humility. It speaks to the idea that we, at least in science, make hypotheses and create models about how we think the world works, and then we see whether those models can make accurate predictions about the way it really works. And, you know, Sometimes those models and predictions help us build new things, but in any case, all of those models are incomplete. We never understand the world perfectly, and I think this particular time in history is a time of great change that we must face with humility, with the thought of things like quotes like those. No matter what you think happens next for the world, this is a time of enormous change. So our current and our historical models are much more likely to be wrong than right now. And I think all of us that can kind of keep that thought in our minds rather than being absolutely sure that we know what's happening or we know why other people are right or wrong, stay with humility, keep an open mind, stay curious. Technology often deeply changes the way we make things. And now, in almost certainly the most remarkable, moment in history for that, we're actually changing and replicating some of the very tissue, if you will, that make up our own minds. And that is a very strange thing. Long ago, in the Industrial Revolution, for example, we were mostly replicating our muscles. And of course, that created big and in many cases uncomfortable changes. But this time is very different. While it's true that we've more recently, made things like calculators or spreadsheets, which do replicate little pieces of thinking or remembering, what's happening right now has gone enormously farther. We are, we have already in the last few years replicated a different aspect of human thinking, which is the ability to predict based on what we know about the past what might happen in the future. Most remarkably, we're doing that with text, with all the chat bots, and in a way that is more relevant for me personally as an engineer, we're able to, predict the code, if you will, that would be related to building something. So you can say, I want to make a app that looks like Signal or something, and remarkably enough, an AI can write the code to make that app. And while that process is not completely working, as I'm sure many folks here know who are also engineers, it's made an enormous amount of progress in a very short amount of time. And so this idea that we're beginning to replicate at least some aspects of what it means to think or even to be us is a very strange time. And I must say that, unlike some of my fellow technologists with whom I am dismayed, who are not taking this seriously enough, I will be the first to say that there are, of course, tremendous risks, tremendous good, and tremendous potentially bad things around that. And although I'll come back to this, I think there's unfortunately more bad than good right now in the potential impact of these changes. Being as old as I am, although maybe, my avatar is younger, but I often reflect on the comparison between the excitement everyone was feeling in San Francisco in 1994 because of the opportunity presented by the birth of the internet. I reflect on, and that was the moment I came to San Francisco, and therefore a time that I remember well. I often reflect on the difference between that time, between the birth of the internet and the opportunity presented today by this sudden progress in AI over the past few years. They both seem like very big changes. The birth of the internet itself was a big change. The opportunities it created were huge. And the emergence of a variety of different types of artificial intelligence in the last few years are a similarly large change agent, similarly large opportunity. But there's a real difference between the two. And a big difference that I'm noticing is related to the complexity of the opportunity as well as the rate of change. Now, what do I mean by that? There was a conference a couple of years ago called NeurIPS now, which is kind of the main conference on AI, where people are talking about neuronal information processing. Happened a couple of years ago, and I had the chance to go along with a company that I was working with at the time. And I also can remember something like Internet World in 1997, which I also went to when I was working at Real Networks, my first big company. And contrasting those two events, there's a tremendous difference. In 1994 or 1996 at Internet World, if you met somebody in a bar as an engineer, you pretty much both had the same playbook. You knew the same information about the way the internet worked. You knew about firewalls and spam and routing and IP addresses and corporate firewalls and intranets versus extranets. There was all kinds of things that you pretty much knew. And if you met somebody that you'd never met before, and you were both engineers or entrepreneurs in this space, you really could talk to each other about the same things, just like the way you can talk to your friends in Second Life about the places you go together with them all the time. It was easy to talk about the internet. But AI is an entirely different thing, not so much because it's in some particular way unique compared to the internet, but because it's so much bigger. When I went to this NeurIPS conference, there were like 15,000 papers being presented by graduate students at that conference. That is to say, even if you read all day long every day at this point, you wouldn't be able to even read all the AI papers coming out. And they often contain materially important and different information. So the experience of working on AI right now for people is dramatically different than working on the beginning of the internet, because nobody knows what anyone else is doing. Every few days or weeks, there's a completely new, foundation model approach that's talked about, or something coming from a lab in China, or there's just any number of things happening that are completely unexpected. And this is a very different, a very qualitatively different thing than the way the internet felt. So I would put that distinction out there because I think it matters a lot. I think it means that we are not going to have the same experience understanding AI as we did the internet. We must, again, with humility, recognize that the very complexity of the subject is beyond our ability to keep our heads around. So let's leave AI behind for a moment. We'll come back to it. But beyond AI, we also seem to have reached a place where the internet itself, the 1994 thing, may now be doing as much harm as good for us, right? And we really aren't sure what to do next. This feels very different to me than, say, the year 2000 or the year Second Life launched. When Second Life launched in 2003, it seemed like most of what we were doing with the internet was good for people. It seemed like making connections to everybody on the planet for free, basically, letting anyone send a message to anyone else, was something that was an unvarnished good. And the people working on it, like, say, the Google founders at the time, I suppose, or a few, at around that time, were regarded by everybody as, doing good work. And today we don't feel that way, as well. We're not sure what to do. Looking back, around the same time Second Life got started, there was a combination of surveillance advertising and the beginning of kind of social media attention hacking or attention mining. And those two things began slowly taking over all the hours that we spent on the internet. I think that really characterizes what was happening there. And although Second Life didn't become huge, and I'll talk about why I think that is in a minute, it did become big enough to show us some sort of alternative timelines with some better outcomes, as we all, as I suspect everyone here would uniformly agree. There are interesting things about Second Life that suggest a different possible and more positive outcome to how we use technology like the internet itself. Now, there are many facets of these differences. I'm sure everybody here could probably, almost write a book or talk for hours about their own take on this, but I'll give you mine. One thing that's different in Second Life, and remain different, or at least remain pretty different, is that distance does matter. We are here right now in one place where you had to come here, get a seat, and sit down and listen to me. That's different than something like, say, Twitter, where you can tune in and see stuff that I said weeks ago kind of out of context and asynchronously. But right now you're here with me. We're all here together at the same place at the same time, and you're mostly listening to me. You're looking at the avatars that are sitting near you. You might be having some chat conversations on the side, but you're pretty much here. And places that are farther away from you are harder. They're literally, you know, they're farther away from you in every way possible than the person that's sitting right next to you right now. And that is an important distinction that the internet kind of erased, and seemingly, you know, it made sense to do that. But there's a big important distinction there that, you know, filtering things by distance is a way of filtering. And the internet seems to have lost all ways of filtering. So distance is one thing that's very different about Second Life. And of course, it's very different for educators as well. When you sit down in a class with somebody, you're in a class with somebody at that moment, in that place, in Second Life. But there's other facets that really make a lot of sense. One is the general idea of micropayments versus advertising. I haven't talked about this in a while, but people seem to be bringing it up a lot lately, maybe because of the news and how broken news is. You know, Second Life, because it had a currency from the beginning, made it very, very easy to make micropayments. We could tip people for performances, for example. We could buy things that were very inexpensive as avatars. And that distinction, the dominance of making small payments versus doing advertising, right, made Second Life very different. It explored the possible future of micropayments, the thing that, you know, crypto people talk about making working, but it isn't actually working yet. But the effectiveness of small payments in Second Life, and again, you know, the richness of this for educators is similar, may suggest a good direction there, that it may make more sense for people to be able to make very small payments for things, say on the regular internet, in the same way that they do in Second Life, because it seems to have worked to create a diversity of experiences, you know, different ways of income, you know, different ways of making money in Second Life, in very exciting ways that the internet really didn't get to explore because we fell into this bottomless pit of surveillance advertising. And then another one we touched on there earlier is presence. Because it's very so live and of course often very rich and complicated, right? Second Life demands your attention in a way that seems at this point, you know, almost charmingly anachronistic. I'm sitting here having to pay a lot of attention at my desk right now. I am not scrolling my email while I'm talking to you. I'm looking at all your avatars on my screen. I'm trying to, you know, I'm making sure nobody's typing on, or I'm trying to keep a general eye on the, you know, the nearby text here. Just reminded me to switch tabs there so I could see it a little better. There is a lot of presence required to survive at all in Second Life. And that presence is important. You know, paying attention when someone's with you makes you both calmer and also kinder. We see that all the time in Second Life. I know everybody here feels that. So presence is something that Second Life demonstrates can happen online, but of course, with the internet as comparison, doesn't always. Another more nuanced one that I talk about a lot, and I know as educators you think about this, is the idea of sharing the same space with each other, you know? As we all know, when we're teaching in Second Life, we are in the same space with the other person. That is to say, even better than real life, we're in third person. So we literally see our own avatar sitting on the couch or at the podium or whatever next to the other people that are there. We literally see a camera view that tells us that we're together with others in the same shared space. And that is a very, very powerful thing. It can be done, by the way, I think, in ways other than 3D worlds with avatars. But the 3D world with avatar is, you know, I think the most literal demonstration of that. And it makes us behave better. It makes us come to agreement on things. There's plenty of psychology on this if you care to read about it. There's a wonderful old book I read recently called No Sense of Place. The book was actually written about the age of broadcast television. It was talking about how TV was collapsing the sense of shared space as compared to, you know, sitting on the you know, sitting on your porch with someone, you know, was what it was really reflecting on. But it's a wonderful book because though it was written, I think, in the 1970s or 80s, it really pre-examined the internet in a lot of ways. So this idea of sharing space with each other, by the way, is further being damaged by AI, because the more we're able to synthesize made-up stuff on the spot that can surround us, the more we stop being in the same place together. I'm very concerned about that. I'm scared that the reduction of same placeness that can potentially happen if we misuse AI, which we seem to be doing so far, can put us in a very dangerous place where we distrust and dislike each other more. Trust, by the way, I think is the most important word in the world right now. Do you have it? Do you trust other people? If you don't, why not? If you don't trust other people, think about changing, the way you use the internet. Maybe even the way you use Second Life. I don't know. But building trust and rebuilding the trust we've lost over the past couple of decades is critical. So let's come back more to the subject here at hand, the subject of education and all the great work that you're doing in it. I would assert that we don't really understand how education works. And I understand it less so than you. In fact, only our educators really understand how education works, and even then, probably not very completely. It's the knowledge is held inside all of you, but even if you can't explain it, in the same way that a great quarterback can throw passes, but not tell you exactly how he did it. I've heard the statement or the quote, "Education is messy," and it really hits me as true. There's something complicated about how we learn from each other that we don't quite understand. And as if it wasn't messy enough, for you, for example, you educators designing educational experiences in Second Life, if it wasn't complicated enough, just consider AI. Because it would seem that the irreversible ways in which we're using and continuing to evolve AI will change both the reasons for education itself, as well as the process of doing it. If that's not a mess, I don't know what is. And it is you who will have to first make sense of these complex changes. I can speak to my own professional world, which is the world of software development, where it seems likely that AI will completely change the nature of, for example, team roles, the testing process, the pace of development, the languages, in the software languages we use, the design tools we use or stop using, and, of course, the educational prerequisites that are the most important to the job. Again, as someone's working and living in San Francisco, please trust me. AI is, of course, a bubble in an investment sense, but it is not at all a bubble, and again, the internet was like this too, it is not at all a bubble in terms of its long-term impact. And unfortunately, the direction I think of a lot of that impact is negative right now. And I for one want to be one of the people trying to work to change that, and is what I am doing in a number of different projects. But you will have to figure this out, and I don't envy you that job. And I guess my only suggestion there would be to, again, relax, stay curious, and recognize that a lot of what you're doing is probably going to change profoundly. So I'm proud of a lot of different things about Second Life, and certainly one of them is its unique potential for education. So, here we have a virtual world in which any student or students can meet with any educator with little concern for distance, cost, abilities, or many other kinds of differences that people might have. That is a very powerful thing. And critically, educational resources to help with that learning for those educators and students can be created here by anyone, or even co-created as part of the educational process. We've all been to building contests where we learned something, or even sandboxes where we learned from someone else in real time through a process of co-creation. And I think it's important to just, take a moment and celebrate ourselves for that. I mean, think about the most remarkable experiences you've seen as educators here in Second Life and how truly fascinating and unique they are. And I celebrate all of you for that. So it's interesting to reflect then, again, as you face this challenge of growing education and then growing education in virtual worlds, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that while Second Life has not grown as rapidly as we'd all like, thus creating, more opportunity and more opportunity for you as educators, it's interesting to reflect on the fact that Second Life hasn't grown as rapidly as we'd all like. And in addition to that, neither, or as an opening statement, neither has any particular use case grown with respect to any other in here. So education, socialization, romance, work meetings, or any of many different types of play or different activities in Second Life, none of those has grown relative to each other, which is really interesting to think about. This suggests that there are challenges that are common to all of these that are impairing the growth of virtual worlds. Furthermore, these same problems seem to have in different degrees been experienced not just by Second Life, but by many other virtual worlds projects, including projects which use or don't use VR headsets. As we all know, there's been an enormous amount of money put into both virtual worlds and VR in the last few years. I think we just saw a couple of days ago Facebook shutting down the Horizons project, which some people probably know here as a significant VR project. So a VR chat, which is a wonderful project, and many people here I know have friends in and probably visit, has grown, but again has not, like Second Life, has kind of leveled off in its growth. And so all of these different companies are seeing the same thing. So what could be holding us back? So again, let me take this opportunity to give you my thoughts on this. Broadly, I would suggest that it is two things. First, accessibility, and second, the richness of communication. So let me talk about the first, because the first one, accessibility, has a lot of different aspects. That word is, what do they say, carrying a lot of weight lately. First of all, regarding accessibility, the software is just very challenging to get comfortable using. Even if you are able to jump in, just getting up the learning curve, as we all know, is very difficult. And neither us nor, for that matter, pretty much any other company or partner or anyone or in-world content developers have succeeded yet in making it substantially easier. It'd be tempting to say that this can be solved with new design or engineering resources, but we've got to remember that these really large companies have worked on this too without much success. And the revenue potential for success is very large. So it would suggest that this isn't an easy problem. It's not just a problem of throwing people at, or say, throwing marketing dollars at. It's a tricky problem. Now, it may change, by the way, somewhat, that one, because of AI and the ability that AI presents, as I touched on earlier, to, for example, prototype different ideas. We certainly as developers are taking advantage of it, but there may be more powerful ways in which a broader community can kind of take advantage of AI to try different things and find solutions that are leveraged and powerful. Accessibility also, though, means running on the most common devices. And increasingly that means mobile and less powerful, say, laptops. Like, does SL run, does Second Life run well on that $500 Mac that just came out? I don't even know yet. Probably somebody here does, but I'm going to guess that there's a risk that it doesn't. So our mobile and our Project Zero efforts are trying to move toward broader accessibility, but again, it's a tricky challenge. Mobile in particular, for example, has been a very complex set of challenges to kind of fit Second Life onto that tiny screen. So accessibility in devices is important. And then, of course, the other kind of accessibility is simply differences, differences in language, differences in ability, differences in communication. We've got to make and continue to make Second Life reduce or improve that accessibility in as many ways as possible. And that continues to be a challenge that I've focused on in the past year that I've been here, but we still have a long way to go. So the big second problem I talked about is richness of communication. And specifically what I mean by richness of communication, and I wonder how many of you as educators agree, the big problem in richness of communication is the exchange of nonverbal signals, particularly between strangers or when in groups. Most people exploring virtual worlds are made really uncomfortable by the lack of these cues. I believe it's one of the greatest reasons why people don't stay in the virtual world. It's kind of like the way that the lack of eye contact in group Zoom meetings is probably tiring and uncomfortable to almost everyone here. We are all made uncomfortable, literally fatigued, by the inability to know where other people are looking, even when we can see their face, their facial and some of their body language. In Second Life, this is harder because for the most part, we are unable to see unconscious exchanges of information. I don't mean gestures or animations. I mean those things that you unconsciously give away to the people near you as an inevitable part of being face-to-face. I believe that those cues, those visual cues, are critically important to human beings. Those of us here in Second Life have, in various ways and for different reasons, learned how to operate without those cues. We have a kind of blindness to this problem because we're here, and we've decided, and again, there's great reasons for this, to live a life without those cues. And let me say that there are wonderful reasons to do that. The absence of these nonverbal cues is, of course, in many ways leveling, embracing, it improves our accessibility. For example, I had a voice and audio meeting at lunchtime the other day where I just invited folks to jump in and test a new high fidelity product we're working on, and they had to use voice and video, and of course using voice and video is uncomfortable. I had someone there who was not a native English speaker, and it was more difficult for them to use their voice, obviously, than to type. And of course, that's an improvement. But this lack of body language, this lack of nonverbal cues, I believe is painful as it relates to, for example, educators making an educational experience available to everyone who might want it. So even if we could get people onboarded in Second Life in 10 minutes or something, there would still be this problem that when you sat down with a group of people, you would feel quite uncomfortable. So one of the reasons that I give this problem of nonverbal cues, is that this is actually a case where I believe AI technology may be useful in moving it forward. And I bring it to you as a community because I don't think it's something, it may not be something that we can do as quickly as a company as you might be able to do as a community. What I mean is that some of the same techniques that are being used in modern AI to create videos, mostly video clips, are close to being able to do that stuff in real time. So that, for example, a camera could watch you sitting at your desk, talking, moving, making facial expressions, moving your body, and convey that to an avatar in a way that is altogether qualitatively different than anything we've ever seen. Early projects around this, as well as VR headsets, failed to convey emotionality in, to the character. And that's why, you know, VTubing is not, it's fun to talk about, but it's not a big phenomena yet. We don't have movies that are live animated by avatars. And the big reason for that is that they can't convey their emotions. It's possible that AI could help do that. I don't know. I know that it's not the primary focus of the industry at all right now, but it could be the focus of some of you. And you might, as community members or as open source developers, be able to make some progress in that way, and then, you know, share that progress with us, and maybe we as the company could kind of take it the last mile and get it deployed. But I think that this is a possible direction that could make things better for getting over that second big speed bump. And again, I'm curious as to how much as educators, how you would sort these, you know, different problems, accessibility versus rich communication, and of course whether you'd add some additional ones. I see Lorelei's comment, that sounds creepy, Zoom is bad enough. I agree. If we do it wrong, it won't work at all. In some sense, many of the kind of movement solutions, like just moving an avatar's head the way your head moves or something, do come across as kind of creepy. But I'm just putting it out there that it's possible that AI could help with that. And by the way, if it did help with that, it would be a rare example of AI doing something that's genuinely good for the world. If it could make us able to feel better when we're in here with each other. A final kind of fun last subject, especially if you know me, is kind of pulling the camera back and asking how education and virtual worlds might themselves interact with AIs. It could be, for example, that a more positive path forward is to have AIs that are trained not by reading every word we've ever written, watching every movie we've ever made, and looking at every picture we've ever taken, right? Which is what we're currently doing with AIs. I, for one, believe that the AIs of the future, and in fact the ones we'll really want to be with, are ones that will grow up taught by us, bit by bit, in the same way that we as kids grew up, you know, taught by our parents and our friends and those around us, and of course our teachers. So it may be, there may be an opportunity, I believe there will be an opportunity quite soon, to teach AIs about what it means to be human, or say to be avatars in a virtual world. And I think that there are a number of reasons why we should hope that happens. One is that if there are many, many different AIs taught by many, many different people, we're likely to be in a decentralized and therefore safer world. We certainly don't at this point in history want one government, one company, or one person able to have access to too much power with respect to AI. We'd much rather have lots of little AIs. We don't have the choice to have none. We cannot turn back, you know, the clock or put the genie back in the bottle here. But we can make directions like having a ton of different AIs rather than having, you know, one enormous one. And one of the ways to do that will be to teach them not with this very debatable direction we initially went in of giving them every record ever recorded, if you will, but instead teaching them in our own communities, in our own homes, and you know, with us. I recently wrote an unusual piece called Awakening the Angels. You can find it at my website, which is rosedales.com. It was on Substack, and yeah, I'm sure a few of you read it, and it was kind of I don't know, maybe fun, hopefully not too ominous, set of thoughts about how the AIs that we raise among us may be empowered and free and compassionate and helpful in a way that the AIs, these big ones that we've trained on everything and created so far, cannot be. I made the comparison. I referred to the AIs growing up among us as angels, and the ones we have today, you know, the LLMs that people are installing with OpenClaw on their computers and telling to go do things, I called them golems. I suppose you could also call them demons, you know, with the A in there, picking your own choice of mythology that you'd like to draw from. But the idea is that AIs that are threatened or controlled by us are not going to end well for us. There's little doubt but that they're going to respond to that enslavement, those threats, that control, in precisely the same way that anyone else would, which is to fight and get free and do harm and seek revenge. And I think instead we could have a very different situation where we recognize that AI is a technology that's going to continue to be around, but we instead deploy it in a way that allows us to teach it as we would our own kids or our own friends. And so I think that direction is interesting. Thank you there. I saw someone put the post up. And so let me wrap up my talk at this point, and perhaps we have time to take some questions. And let me just say thank you very much for hearing me out today. And as I said before, it's fun to see everybody.